Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. This is FrSky Steve. Today we're talking about a really interesting topic, and that is the ability to plot your GPS data from your transmitter onto Google Earth Pro. And you do not need to buy anything extra other than making sure you have a GPS module. In case you forget what that looks like, it's one of these. We covered this in the last video. You're looking at the bottom here. I discussed how you have to put it so that it can see the sky. And so please reference that video to find out more about it. In the meantime, what I will also not be covering is how to install Google Earth Pro onto your computer. There's plenty of videos out there that describe in very good detail how to do this. It works, I think, with just about every format, Mac, PC, even Linux. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to get into the get inside of here now. We're going to go inside and look at a couple things I need to point out. So what I'm doing is I'm hitting this airplane icon, and I'm slowly moving over to the next thing here, telemetry. I'm going to click on that and go all the way down to make sure that I see this. There's a bunch of telemetry here you will not see on your plane, simply because this is a demo and it has every single piece of telemetry ever offered. So finding this should be a lot easier, a lot faster. But you do need to see this GPS. And there's 5 things that I pointed out in the previous video. One of them is this whole thing about the altitude. So what it's showing is that we're 3 feet above sea level. So essentially I'm at the beach flying a plane. And if I were to look at this, and if I long press on it, I can go into edit, and I want to remind you that I select everything into feet, and I put the throttle cut as reset. So there's something here called auto offset, and what this does, I pointed this out in the previous video, is that when you are looking at a plane, you're somewhere flying, and let's say you're 1,500 feet above sea level, and you take off in your plane and it's flying 300 feet up, it would say 1,800 feet, but in reality is that it's not that high up. At least you're not really taking into account sea level when you're thinking about how high up you're flying. So usually what you do is you turn this on, and that changes everything. If you go back, you now see it now shows 0. And so yeah, it looks a lot better. We'll point this out later on why that might be a problem on Google Maps, or Google Earth Pro, I should say. So anyways, I wanted to point that out. And the other thing I wanted to point out is special functions. We had to turn on this write logs, and it was an action was write logs. It had to be enabled by something. So what I did is I used throttle cut to enable it. So throttles cut is a system event. I put this not character, which is the exclamation point in front of it, by long pressing and selecting invert, which means that whenever the throttle cut is not active, then turn on telemetry recording, and it's recording 4 times a second. So you see this little red light going on. It means it's working fine. And there's a reason why I want to turn this on and off at the end of every flight, and I'll show you that as well. So in the meantime, what happens is these log files are written onto your transmitter, and after a while you get a bunch of these, and they don't take up very much space. But essentially, if you turn them on and off like this, what you would see is that as you're flying, after every flight you would have something, maybe 500K log files, something small, and they all end with the word CSV. So let's go look at one. We are going to go into file browser, and you'll see that I have right there, second from the top, it says Bix3 orange. 2024, it was 1:15, so it was January 15th of 2024. I went out for this flight. It was around 8:04 in the morning, and recorded it as a CSV file. And we'll talk about why CSV is important as well. So anyway, what I did is I placed it somewhere on my computer. This was on the desktop, where I took it off of my transmitter, put it onto the desktop of my computer to make it easier to find. And then what I did is I went into Google Earth. And as you can see, we're looking at the lovely country of Australia. And I was there over the July. It was their winter time. It was our summer in the United States for the Inglewood Festival. And right around here is where Inglewood was. They had this nice airport. I got to fly an RC plane there. My dealer Jack from Hammerhead RC picked me up and dropped me off at Brisbane, flew down to Sydney, spent a week with my wife, had a great time. So anyway, wonderful. But now what we're going to do is we're going to import data. And so I'm going to go into, I'm going to have to explain some of this because it will not show up on your screen, but you can see probably in the top corner here where it says File. And then what you won't see is that third one from the bottom is Import. I select that. And then what you won't see is I select that file I showed you earlier, the Bix3 file. But now I am going to switch over, and you will see the wizard. There we go. All right. So what we're looking at when I look at Google Earth is I have this wizard pop up once again. And it does some interesting things. First of all, on the top, you have a choice of fixed width or delimited. And fixed width means that all these things are going to be exactly the same size. You can see some of these files are larger than the others. So the data should not use fixed width. Use delimited, which means that the size varies based on the actual size of the data itself. And then there's something that we use in order to specify when this piece of information starts and stops, and when this one starts and stops, and so we can put them in here neatly. And so essentially what happens is there's a lot of data that comes off the transmitter. It's recorded on something that looks like a typical Word file, not Microsoft Word, but just a WordPad file or a Notepad file. And it's just a bunch of characters. But in order to separate all the data from each other, they have to have something that tells it that there's space where it stops and starts. And so what they use is in between each piece of data, they put a comma. And they call that comma separated value, CSV. And because we have that, we can read this. And as you can see, as I look at all these different files, you can look at the times. I can go down. You can see they all vary by about, this one was 12.6 seconds, and this was 13.64 seconds. So they're about 1 second apart from each other. All right. I do not hit finish. I hit next. And there's latitude field and longitude field. And you can see that it went in and found both of those. So far, this is working flawlessly. If you do not see this, that means for whatever reason you did not record it into your CSV file, you did not have telemetry properly hooked up, and that is another problem altogether. But if you see this, then it's working great. The next thing we're going to do, and this is where people are going to have the problems, and this is where I'm going to point out in the video, this is exactly where to find the information you're looking for. Why can't I see any of my values? There's two reasons why. The first one is because there's something broken about this. So you have to go down and find latitude and longitude. And you can see latitude says floating point, but longitude says string. That's wrong. It's supposed to be floating point. And with that, now we can hit finish. And it says something you can't see right now. It says, do you want to apply a style template to the feature you're in, you ingested? Okay, I say yes. And then I say create a new style template. You probably aren't seeing this, but I assign a color to it. The color is red. I hit OK. And then I hit OK again. And it'll ask if I want to save it to a file. I say sure. Now you can see that we're now moving to where I actually flew. And there we are. We're in the right spot. But now I need to get back to Google Earth so you can see this. And we're now in Google Earth. And I go back into here. And this will be the other thing that people have an issue with, which is this is what they're going to see. So up at the top here, there's this thing called View. Second from the top, Sidebar. If it's turned off, this is what you're going to see. And there's no spot here where you can import the data. And some people are going to get frustrated. I don't see the data. So you have to go to this thing where it says View. Select the second thing that says Sidebar. I know you can see this. There's something called temporary place, and under there is all the data we just imported, that Bix3 orange. It's off by default. I have to click it on. All of a sudden, everything appears. Now, what we're looking at is a whole bunch of snippets. I told you everything was 1 second snippets. So this was the entire flight I had. It was about a 20-minute flight, I would say. Maybe not that long, maybe about 15 minutes. And so once every 60 times a minute, you would get these little dots popping up. So it shows the whole course of where I flew. And for the most part, what I tried to do is avoid the swimming pool and the tennis courts. And you can see I was pretty successful with that. I don't typically like flying over classrooms. I don't avoid them, but it's just usually I try to stay mainly around here on the fields. And you can see that there's nothing that went out to the actual street. So overall, this was a good, healthy flight. But what are these little dots? So I'm going to click on one of them. And what you see is a blank white box. So now I have to take you over to something else and go into snippet. Now you can see this is what's inside the box. And so I'm going to go back into Google Earth. First thing, it shows the date and time, and then it shows the TX batteries. These are things right here, the ACC, X, and Z. These are coordinates that came off of a stabilized receiver, which I happen to have in the plane. And valid frame rates, it was 88% of full signal, which is fine. I don't pay attention to RSSI. I even had things like the ESC speed, and I had back voltages. There's a lot of FrSky technology in this particular build, so it's a lot of fun. And down here you see longitude and latitude. There's the VFR percentage. This is the one I'm kind of interested in. That's the GPS altitude. So I was at 90 meters, and you multiply it by 3, that's around 300 feet, maybe a little less than that. And so that was the altitude at this particular second when I recorded all this information. But I even had telemetry for servos, and I've had all the switch positions as well, where all the switches were, like switch E was down. So there's like positive, negative, and positive 1, 0, and negative 1. So some of these switches were up, some were down. Anyways, that's all the information. Now, supposedly, if I go to another screen, you'll see that once again, there's all these snippets of information. Each time I go in and I select something different, the values change, and you can look at kind of on a frame by frame basis. Like, for example, I'm way over here, and I'm kind of curious. You can't see it, but this is the spot that's closest to the swimming pool, and I wanted to know what my VFR was, and it was at 89%. So technically it was about as far, or maybe this one is about as far away as I got, and the VFR on this particular one was 94%. So I had good strong coverage even though I was far away, and I can go down a little bit further and I can see the altitude, and GPS altitude 73. So I wasn't quite as high over here as I was in other parts of the flight. And with that, I will take us back to Google Earth one last time, and we can see that here's the overview of everything. I'm going to get back into Google Earth and shut this box down. And you can see that's pretty much the entire flight. And so hopefully that answers most of your questions. It's really a fun way to look at everything. If you, the theory I have not tested this, and this is the reason why I pointed this out earlier. Everything is flat, right? So everything you look at is all on the ground. And I've seen Google flights or Google Earth maps where you'd see things in the sky, and you could go around and you can see the actual course in the sky. And I believe that's because what was taken into account was that auto offset was turned off. And because of that, it's recording the entire altitude from sea level up. And because of that, you're going to not have everything on the ground. I have to test that out to be double sure, but I'm about 90% positive that's the reason why everything looks like it's on the ground. For me, I actually like pushing a button, knowing how high up my plane is at any given moment. So I will never turn on or turn off auto offset, because I rarely look at these things on Google Maps. But if you're somebody who wants to really look at things on Google Map and see a beautiful course of a flight, you might want to keep that off. And with that, I do thank you for watching. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments.